Well, there's nervousness around the world ahead of Donald Trump's self-proclaimed Liberation Day, when he's set to announce across-the-board tariffs that could spark a global trade war.
Global markets and US trading partners are bracing as President Donald Trump prepares to unveil what could be sweeping new tariffs.
The year 2025 marked a turning point in international trade relations, particularly between the United States and Mexico. President Donald Trump, already known for his confrontational stance on trade, decided to escalate the economic tensions between the two neighboring nations. As part of his administration's broader economic strategy, Trump took aim at one of Mexico's most significant industries, automotive manufacturing. In April 2025, Trump issued a striking warning: a 25% tariff on all goods imported from Mexico. This was not limited to auto parts. It covered a wide range of products, including essential goods such as avocados, a symbol of Mexico's agricultural exports. But the centerpiece of this threat was the automotive industry. The U.S. has been heavily reliant on Mexican-made parts for years. Mexico sends nearly 3.5 million vehicles to the U.S. annually, making up a staggering 80% of its total exports. This had a direct impact on the U.S. automotive sector, where parts manufactured in Mexico were a critical component of assembly lines for giants like Ford, General Motors, and Fiat Chrysler. The threat of tariffs created immediate panic in the markets. U.S. automakers, whose production depended on smooth supply chains between the two countries, faced the potential of massive production delays and increased costs. The ripple effect would affect the entire automotive industry, from car makers to part suppliers, and ultimately, American consumers. These tariffs were not just numbers on a balance sheet. They had the potential to cause real-world disruptions to people's lives, including job losses and rising vehicle prices. In Mexico, the government and business leaders were caught in a dilemma. Should they confront the U.S. head-on with retaliation, or should they find a diplomatic solution? It was clear that this wasn't just about trade. It was about economic survival and national pride. President Trump's move was seen by many as an attempt to reassert the U.S.'s dominance in North America, but it also brought to light the interdependence between the two countries, especially in sectors like automotive production and agriculture. When the tariff threat was leveled against Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, the newly elected president of Mexico, had only been in office for a few months. However, she was already faced with a test of her leadership that would define her presidency. Many predicted that she would react angrily, retaliating with harsh language or even immediately implementing counter-tariffs. Instead, Sheinbaum stunned the world with her calm, measured response. In stark contrast to her predecessor's more fiery speeches, Sheinbaum remained composed, choosing not to escalate the rhetoric. Instead, she took a more strategic approach that emphasized unity over division. She organized a massive rally in Mexico City's Zocalo Square, one of the largest public squares in the world, to demonstrate Mexico's resolve. The rally wasn't a protest. It was a statement of solidarity and determination. Sheinbaum's message was clear. Mexico would not back down, but would pursue diplomacy first and foremost. In her speech, Sheinbaum called for unity and emphasized that Mexico was not a victim of Trump's economic policies. It was an equal partner on the global stage. She made it clear that, while Mexico could retaliate with tariffs, she preferred to use diplomacy and dialogue to resolve the issue. This approach stood in stark contrast to the fiery rhetoric coming from Trump's administration, which at times seemed more intent on fanning the flames of nationalism and protectionism. This calculated response caught the U.S. by surprise. Sheinbaum's leadership style was both pragmatic and populist, appealing to the Mexican public's sense of sovereignty and pride, while also positioning herself as a global leader. While Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced an intense diplomatic clash with Trump over similar tariff threats, Sheinbaum's ability to maintain her composure earned her respect from both allies and adversaries. Trump, in a surprising twist, even cited his respect for Sheinbaum as a reason to delay the tariffs until April 2nd. This was an unprecedented level of diplomatic recognition from the U.S. president, who typically didn't show much respect for international leaders, particularly those from countries he perceived as rivals. While Sheinbaum's public response was focused on unity and diplomacy, her team was working tirelessly behind the scenes to build a network of support and strategic alliances. Mexico's response was not just about words. It was about the power of economic leverage and diplomatic backchannels. Sheinbaum's administration wasn't idle in the face of Trump's tariff threat. Mexico's foreign ministry immediately began planning for retaliation. They targeted U.S. industries that were heavily reliant on Mexican imports. The automotive sector was at the top of the list, but Mexico also focused on agricultural products, including soybeans, pork, and corn, which were vital to U.S. farmers. U.S. lawmakers, particularly those from states like Texas and California, began receiving direct pressure from Mexican officials. Simultaneously, U.S. auto industry lobbyists, some of the most powerful players in American politics, began lobbying hard against the tariffs. Mexican officials were well aware that the auto industry was the Achilles heel for Trump's economic agenda. Without the seamless flow of Mexican-made auto parts, U.S. car manufacturers would face enormous delays and cost increases. Automakers made it clear that tariffs would destroy their profitability, and the effects would ripple through the U.S. economy, resulting in job losses and economic instability. Agricultural groups, especially those in Trump's rural base, were equally concerned. Many of these farmers relied heavily on Mexican markets for exports. Retaliatory tariffs would have a disastrous effect, particularly in Texas, California, and other red states that supported Trump in the 2024 election. This bipartisan opposition to Trump's tariff threats created a unique situation where Mexico's diplomacy was aligned with U.S. economic interests, forcing Trump to reconsider his position. Faced with mounting opposition from U.S. industries and a well-organized diplomatic response from Mexico, Trump found himself in an uncomfortable position. His economic plan, designed to punish Mexico, was in danger of backfiring. The more Trump pushed for tariffs, the more it became clear that these measures could damage American industries, increase consumer costs, and jeopardize the livelihoods of workers in key battleground states. In a highly unusual move, Trump decided to pause the tariff implementation, pushing the decision to April 2nd with a temporary reprieve. He made it clear that this decision was largely due to his respect for Sheinbaum and her calm approach. This pause, though only temporary, was a significant diplomatic victory for Sheinbaum. Unlike other global leaders, Sheinbaum had managed to navigate the storm without resorting to aggressive rhetoric or economic retaliation. She had won Trump's respect, and for a president known for his toughness, this was no small feat. While Trump's temporary reprieve gave the U.S. a chance to reconsider its position, it was not a permanent solution. Sheinbaum, however, had already started laying the groundwork for future diplomacy. Her administration worked with both the U.S. government and key industry stakeholders to craft a plan that would allow both countries to come to a compromise without triggering a full-blown trade war. As the threat of tariffs loomed over the bilateral trade relationship, Mexico's leverage extended far beyond just the automotive sector. President Sheinbaum's team knew that Mexico held key assets that the U.S. could not afford to lose. Energy was one of the most powerful bargaining chips. The U.S. heavily relies on Mexican crude oil to feed its refineries, and Mexico controls vital energy infrastructure along the U.S.-Mexico border. If Mexico chose to retaliate by cutting oil exports or imposing tariffs on energy products, it would send shockwaves through the U.S. economy, particularly in states like Texas, which depend on energy production. In this game of trade warfare, energy was a critical point of leverage for Mexico. Another crucial aspect of Mexico's leverage was migration. Sheinbaum had previously implemented policies to reduce the flow of migrants to the U.S. border, including deploying 10,000 National Guard troops to combat illegal crossings. This wasn't just about addressing the U.S.'s security concerns. It was also a political maneuver. Mexico's ability to control migration became another bargaining chip in negotiations. Sheinbaum's strategic use of migration issues showed the U.S. that Mexico could hold the upper hand on more than just trade. As the April 2nd deadline approached, the question on everyone's mind was, would diplomacy hold, or was the world on the brink of a massive geopolitical breakdown? Trump's administration had sent mixed signals in the days leading up to the deadline. Some reports suggested that the tariffs would be implemented, while others hinted at a potential compromise. Meanwhile, Sheinbaum's team remained focused on executing their strategic plan, which included targeted retaliatory tariffs that would hit U.S. agriculture and industrial equipment without hurting the average American consumer. In the final days before the deadline, Sheinbaum's leadership was put to the test. Mexico had prepared for all contingencies, including the possibility of a full-blown trade war. Yet, the country remained committed to its core values of sovereignty and mutual respect in international relations. Would Sheinbaum's cool-headed diplomacy and strategic use of energy and migration leverage be enough to prevent a trade war, or were both countries heading for an inevitable collision? As the trade standoff between Mexico and the U.S. escalated, Canada and Mexico began to form a united front in response to the increased trade pressure from the U.S. On April 1, 2025, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney engaged in crucial talks aimed at confronting the tariffs imposed by President Trump. The two leaders recognized the critical need for cooperation to protect their economic interests and safeguard the prosperity of North America in the face of escalating U.S. protectionism. The discussions between Sheinbaum and Carney were grounded in a shared understanding of the challenges posed by U.S. trade policies. Both leaders emphasized the importance of solidarity in a time of trade uncertainty and expressed their commitment to supporting each other in the face of external pressures. Their collaboration goes beyond the typical diplomatic rhetoric. It signals a coordinated effort to preserve the integrity of the North American market and avoid the potential economic fallout that could arise from a prolonged trade war. This strategic partnership not only aims to shield their respective economies from the harsh effects of U.S. tariffs, but also signals to the U.S. that North America is not a fragmented entity. It is a unified economic powerhouse that can stand against trade policies that are perceived as unfair. With both nations taking steps to bolster their economic resilience, their collaboration highlights the growing importance of regional alliances in an era of rising protectionism. The ongoing trade dispute has already begun to reshape the economic outlook for Mexico. In response to the U.S. tariffs, Mexico's finance ministry revised its 2025 growth forecast, downgrading it from an earlier prediction of 2.0% to 3.0% to a more cautious 1.5% to 2.3% range. This adjustment reflects the heightened economic uncertainty created by the U.S. trade actions, which have disrupted both consumer confidence and business investment. The tariffs and the resulting trade disruptions have had a ripple effect throughout the Mexican economy. Several key sectors, particularly automotive manufacturing, are expected to face delays in production and increased costs. However, while the economy faces headwinds, there remains a sense of cautious optimism within the Mexican government. The domestic consumption, that has been a cornerstone of Mexico's growth, remains relatively strong, and there are expectations that job creation in sectors like services and construction will continue to offset some of the negative impacts. Despite the downward revision in growth forecasts, the Mexican government is confident in its ability to weather the storm. The adjustment, according to officials, is part of a broader strategy to ensure that the economy remains competitive, even in the face of a more challenging international environment. As the global trade landscape continues to shift, Mexico is positioning itself to remain an active player, adapting its strategies to ensure that it can continue to grow, despite the rising tensions with its neighbor to the north. So, is Sheinbaum's strategy sustainable? Is it the new model for trade resistance? Will Mexico continue to use energy and migration as powerful leverage, or will this approach backfire in the long run? As the situation evolves, we'll continue to watch closely. One thing is for sure, the stakes are massive, and the world is waiting to see who will win this high-stakes trade war. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis on this and other key global issues. Resistance? Will Mexico continue to use energy and migration as powerful leverage, or will this approach backfire in the long run? As the situation evolves, we'll continue to watch closely. One thing is for sure, the stakes are massive, and the world is waiting to see who will win this high-stakes trade war. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis on this and other key global issues.